Hi everyone. Today I'd like to do a demonstration of using free and open source software as part of the K-12 curriculum. Traditionally, high schools and even junior highs are introducing computers to students using traditional environments like the Windows operating system or even the Macintosh operating system. In addition, they'll do a bit of work around computer software applications, most often Microsoft Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc., and the Adobe Creative Suite, including tools like Photoshop. So today I'd like to present a demonstration of using the GNU image manipulation program, or what's called GIMP, instead of Photoshop. My son is currently in a computer class like this and is using Photoshop and has done a couple of exercises that I'd like to replicate using a completely open source environment. So you'll notice I'm running Ubuntu desktop up here, and I'm have the standard distribution and installation with the default settings. The only thing I've done is, of course, download GIMP and Kazam, which I'm using to record the desktop, and OpenShot video editor, which I'll be using to edit the video later on so I can put it online. So let's start off. What you can see here is the finished assignment that my son did. It's a combination bear rhinoceros. I don't know what that is, a bino or a rhino bear or something. Essentially what they've done is created a rhinoceros head with fur on the body of a bear, and he got a 98 on it, so of course we're very pleased with his grade and his participation in school. And what I like to do now is do this exact same assignment using GIMP rather than Photoshop. So I'm going to close that up, and here we see the original that my son used for his project, and I also went ahead and grabbed a picture of a rhinoceros. So the first thing I'm going to do is open GIMP, and you see what presents is something that anyone using Photoshop would probably be used to seeing. We have our various windows here. You can resize them to take up the whole screen, or you can scale the windows to fit anything you want. I just happen to like it about this size. You also have your toolboxes. This is the standard toolbox with a lot of the same selection tools that you would find. The rectangle, ellipse, the lasso, magic wand, and so on. Different scaling tools, and we'll get into these a little later. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up the picture, drag and drop it right into the workspace. And we notice that the original is the bear is looking the other way. So we can simply go up to Image, Transform, and we're going to flip this horizontally. All right, and we can see here that the bear is now sitting in the background. We have one layer, and the layers again will be familiar to those folks who are used to working in Photoshop. Now I'm going to add the other image, and I can go ahead and open that as a layer. So it'll grab the image of the rhino, and when it's imported into the project as a new layer. So, oops, looks like I just drew on there, didn't mean to do that. I can hide the layer, and you can see that because I still have the layer selected, although the image is hidden, I can see the border for the frame. When I click that to click the other layer, that goes away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click back into this layer, show it, and I'm going to grab it and move it over a little bit. And then I'm going to zoom in so that I can begin to just select that rhino head. And you can do that a couple different ways, just like you would in Photoshop. You can grab the sort of just main area, and then you can deselect areas on this. So notice that I have a little minus sign next to my magic lasso, just like in Photoshop, and I've deselected everything. Again, if I hold the shift button, I can add just like I would in Photoshop. Hitting the control button in GIMP allows me to deselect something, and I can remove parts of that I don't want of my marching ants here. You'll notice that I can draw freely, just like in Photoshop. And then when I let go of the mouse, I get these lines with little circles. So I can draw or create straight lines as well. And when that last node of my selection is selected, it means that I've completed the loop and I can close the circle. Or I can just connect it automatically by dragging it over there. I can also use the magic wand, and again, by hitting the control, I will deselect an area. And notice what happens when I hold the mouse. It finds all the pixels within the threshold that I've set for that. So just like in Photoshop, I can adjust the threshold to select more or less difference between the pixel selected and the pixels around it. So 15 seems to be working pretty good. I don't know if there's any science to this. You just sort of eyeball it. And it looks like I'm doing a good job deselecting things. Here I'm in the grass. And this really works well for getting a really close selection, especially when there's a big difference between what you're selecting and the object that you want to deselect. Now, in this case, I'm removing pixels instead of adding pixels. So I'm slowly whittling away the pixels until there's nothing left but the rhino head. Down here, I'm going to zoom in a little more, and again, grab the magic lasso and hit deselect, and just get really all of this sort of leftover pixel waste that I'm not interested in. All right, and I can zoom in again. Let me see over here. Got some random stuff. And it looks like let me just grab this. Looks like I'm all pretty good. So now I probably want to come in with a little finer work here. And now I'm just going to freehand and trace along the best as I can. Forgot to hold the control button and deselect. Alright, and I'm doing what I hope would be a nice job of outlining the rhinoceros. That was a little miss. And you can see the magic wand has done a pretty good job of picking up most of the extra pixels. Alright. Just eyeballing it here. Moving along the edge. Looks like he's got a little bit of, or she has got a little bit of grass in her mouth. So you can see at this point there's really no difference in the technique or the output of Photoshop and GIMP so far. It looks like there's a little space here that I might want to actually add. So by holding Shift, you notice a little plus comes up there. I'll put it over here so you can see the plus. So now I'm going to add this ear back. And you notice the selection tool, the marching ants seem to be going around all together. So I'll zoom out here. Looks like I've got a pretty good selection of the rhino head. Now, often when you make a cut like this, when you cut out these images, the line is too sharp. The difference between the object that you're selecting and you cut out, what you cut out is this sharp line that makes it look like it's been cut and pasted. So what I like to do is actually bring in the border, the selection here, a couple pixels into the object I'm cutting out, and then feather the edge to make a nice blend between the object and the background. So you can do that by going to the selection tool, and I can grow or shrink. So I'm going to shrink my selection, I don't know, maybe just by 2 or 3 pixels. Let's try 2. And you notice it came in there, and that's probably a little too much. So I'm going to undo that, just like I would in Photoshop. And I'm going to come back up here to the select, and I'm going to shrink my selection. Let's just make it 2. Whoops, 2 there. So that's pretty good. And now I'm going to feather the edge, which essentially reduces the difference between the selected area and the background, so that there's almost a transparency, a blurred edge along the selection. So you can do that again by going to select and feather, and I'll just do 2 pixels. Select OK. You don't notice anything here because you don't see the border yet. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to copy this rhinoceros head, edit, copy, and I'm going to create a new layer. And I can either create the new layer by, just like in Photoshop, saying new layer, make it the same size. There it is. I can then go into this rhino as my working layer. I don't know if I already copied it, so I'll say edit, copy. I'm copying the selection, going into this and hitting paste. I now have a floating layer. And interestingly, if I had done this without creating the layer, I could actually make this a new layer. So now I have a new layer. I can rename it Rhino Head. Oops, I had my cap locks on. Sorry about that, folks. Rhino Head. And I can go back to this layer. I don't need it. I could have pasted it in there. I'll hide it for right now. I can move it just like in Photoshop. It's hidden. And now I get rid of this, and I've got a nice rhino head floating. That was my copied version. And you can see as I bring it back and forth. Now you notice the scale's a little off here. So I'm going to go ahead and scale this by selecting the layer. You'll see this yellow box indicates the size of the image, in GIMP what they call that for each layer. It indicates how big your layer is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just not select anything, and I'm going to go ahead and hit my scale tool. I'm going to just click on that, and you'll notice what comes up is a grid that allows me to scale the object. But you know, that doesn't really work just by grabbing one of the anchor points, because my distorted proportions here. So I'm going to cancel that, and this time I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to constrain the proportions by clicking the little link here, and I can either put in some sort of value, and you notice the scales, or what I like to do is sort of eyeball it here, and then I'm using the back of the neck here to sort of see if that's the right size. Alright, so I guess that looks about right. Let me move this out of the way. And I can hit scale, and now it's scaled. I can move it around. Maybe that wasn't the right spot. That looks about like a right spot. Alright, so now I've got this nice rhino head here, but the bear is peeking out behind it. So I'm going to actually want to remove that. So I can do that a couple different ways. I can hide the rhino head and select the working layer as the bear. And I can, just like in Photoshop, grab the eyedropper and grab a color there and come in with a brush. And you notice I have all sorts of brushes to choose from. I'll pick a larger brush, scale that brush up. You can see the brush head gets bigger. and so on. Or, let me undo that, I could use the clone tool, and just like in Photoshop, I select the area that, oops, sorry about that. I select the area that I want to clone. Let's say I want to take this sort of area. You can see that area has been selected and highlighted. And then wherever I paint, it, just like in Photoshop, will replicate, clone that area. So now I'll come over here, sort of line up again, paint. And why don't I put the rhino head up? Oh, looks like I did too much. So now I'll put the rhino head up so that I can work just in this layer and make sure I line it up so it looks nice. There we go. And try to find a nice look there. Alright, that looks pretty good. That looks like I copied that one little weird thing, so I'll take that and just sort of fill it in there. That's pretty good. That looks a little too staged, so I'll just go get my smudge tool. And again, the smudge tool works just like in Photoshop. Make the head a little bigger and blend this by smudging it. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. That's a little too sharp of a contrast there. And I think that all looks pretty good. So there's the lake in the background. All right, so now you can see I've sort of cut into the head there, and I've only got the rhino head. Next thing I want to do is add some fur to the image here, or the rhino head image. So I will go ahead and just grab some of the fur, perhaps back here on the hind corners. So get that cloning tool. Here we go. We like this spot. Let's try this. We'll make the opacity of the cloning tool less. And as I paint that on, maybe that'll look better. Yeah, I think that's a better way to do it. There we go. I like the darker hair down here for the lighter hair up here. Let's see here. A little more. Around the eye. And, like this here. And nice and dark there. You really start playing with the colors. It's starting to look good around the neck. A little darker over here. And a little lighter on top of it. Yeah. pretty good. And up by his nose, something really light. I'll make my brush a little smaller so it can fit in between the horns and the eye there. I think this should be the lightest right here. And I like to catch some of this scruff, so I'm going to actually turn up. So give him a little bit of a like that. Alright, looks like he's got some hair on his face now. I'm going to make the brush size much bigger. And I'm going to grab this whole spot here, make it much. This looks good. And I'll take this dark area right here, put it under by his. That looks a little bad. Needs to be facing down more, I think. There we go. Oh, that looks good. Now I need some hair that's sort of coming almost straight down. I like this one. That looks good. Now something that can go nice, light along this ridge. Oh, maybe the shoulder area. Let me make the size of the brush a little less. Oops. Oops. Grab that area. And I want to put that right here. Yeah, I like that around there. So that's pretty good. Maybe I'll put something on here on his lip. A nice dark patch. Ooh, too dark. How about this one? Oh, that's pretty good. Come zoom back out here. And this right here bothers me. But let's open up our example and see how close we did here. His is a little dark. His looks better than mine. Oh. His is mine looks like it's been a few more winters. I think it looks pretty good. I like my nose. The eye looks pretty good. Maybe I'll come in with some shadows here and fix the ear so you can see the ear a bit. So I want to take just the dodge and burn tool, and I'm going to burn. Go back to a normal brush. Looks good. And maybe just put in some shadow. Ooh, that's not good. Whoops. Let me bring down the opacity. This might be a little too big. You can still see some fur on there. I'll get my clone tool out and I'll add a little hair around that. But now I've definitely lost my ear, so I'll grab that clone tool again. bring that out. They have a bigger brush. And then I'll do just the opposite to give it a highlight, smaller. Oops, sorry. Smaller brush. Too small. And it's a little hard. And a softer brush. And I'll just get the smudge tool there to sort of blend it. And if it looks a little too smudged, I'll get the sharpen tool, and that always adds a few pixels to make it look a little. Alright, so now you can see the ear a little better. Back out. There you go, it's really pronounced now. Alright, so it's not exactly the same as my son's, but I think that qualifies as having completed the assignment. Looking on the shadows here, reflection. Well, I guess I could put a little reflection of his head, but there's not a reflection so much of the bear's head. But there you go. That's using GIMP and all the same sort of image processing tools. I don't know if it's exactly the same techniques. This was literally my first time through it. Second time through might be a little smoother. But I hope this has been a good example of how you can use free and open source software to provide the same teaching and learning opportunities for students as you can with proprietary software. Thanks so much.